Good morning, all. Happy to meet you on a nice weekend and start talking about some of the interesting aspects of heritage and knowing your culture through the temples. This is sponsored by the Bloomington Normal Hindu Temple Organization, and happy to participate and spread the awareness about Hindu heritage and its temples. Today, we are going to talk about around 1 hour or 1 hour 10 minutes on Know Your Culture Through the Temples. This event is sponsored and organized by Hindu Temple of Bloomington, Normal, in US, and I'm happy to present this to the mainline US audience and contribute a little to awareness about our heritage. This went live, and since there was some recording issues, I am re-recording this again with some refinements so that this can be spread into a wider audience. Today, we are going to talk about Know Your Temples, Know Your Culture from the various aspects of temples. So, we can talk about the evolution of how the temples expanded and how the worship of God, the idols and structures, and the econometry, how it evolved, and also what we infer from the artifacts that are available in the temple, like sculptures, Puranas. You get the history from inscription and how temples functioned as different cultural centers. This is a series of talk, and in the first part, we are going to focus on the color blue, primarily focusing on the evolution of worship and how the temples expanded from ages, and what are the components of a temple and how they expanded over a period of 1,000 years, and what are the vimana forms, and a little bit about its components, and a brief overview on what are the great temples in India in the past, present, and future. This will be around 1 hour plus, and once this is done, probably in the later presentations, we'll be talking about the evolution of idols and iconography and the history we learn from temple artifacts. So before we start the presentation, let us go into the bibliography and the credits. For making this presentation, I attribute most of the images and the basic content from Google Underwear. He is the ultimate god of this age, where he gives anything and everything on demand. And the Wikipedia Pujari, who collates all this information and gives it as a reference and also gives from where he has taken. It is very useful for books and journals to refer for details. In terms of books, I have read 3 or 4 major reference books for making this presentation. For iconography, I was working on T.A. Gopinath Rao's Hindu iconography, and for epigraphy and Indian scripts, Sivaramurthy's book on Indian epigraphy. And for architecture, I was relying mostly on Adam Hardy and his graphic style of explaining things in a simple way. And for forms of Shiva and others, my guru is Shankaranarayanan Ji, who has detailed a lot of presentations in terms of agamas, the various forms that are defined in agamas. I also work and contribute towards the Tamil Heritage Trust, a organization in Chennai, which is focusing on expanding the heritage awareness to the next generation. So we conduct how to see a temple, a one-day program, which has 4 sessions on various aspects highlighted in the slide. And we also have a one-day around a 2 hour workshop, practical workshop in one of the temples in Chennai, Mylapore. So the presentation here is a collective experience based on all these factors. So to set the context, primarily this presentation is targeted at English-speaking audience who understand some amount of Hindu Dharma and Purana basics and about the kings of India. So I won't be explaining about the basics of this in this talk. The scope is primarily talking about the Hindu gods, temple architecture, sculptures. This is a bigger scope. In the current session, we will be focusing only on the temple architecture part. So by the time you complete the sequence of 3-4 sessions in this series, you will be able to appreciate the timeline of how the temple components were built over time. By seeing a mandapa, we will be able to say that yes, this was done during the 8th or 9th century. And by looking at the deity, you will be able to appreciate when this deity came into worship and then when it went into decline, kind of a thing. You also understand the components, how the temple components expanded and how they are built by different dynasties. And you will be able to recognize the inscription and say that what is the value of recognition and what kind of history it says. And also by looking at the sculptures or panels, you will be able to understand what Purana or what the story it conveys. And finally, you will be able to appreciate the usage of temple as a social hub, like how the most of the US temples are functioning now, and able to see how much of this can be expanded to have more credibility to the society. People who are interested to learn more about this can read these following books for enhanced knowledge. One is the simple book by S.P. Gupta, Elements of Indian Art, and some more detailed books on architecture by Adam Hardy and Gopinath Rao, Hindu Iconography, and Stella Karambridge has written a beautiful book on Art of India. This covers architecture, iconography, and paintings. Before we start into the main picture and the presentation, I'd like to say my pranams to the Shilpis who made the Devaliyas. When we talk about any program, take a TV program, we talk about the sponsor about 2 minutes. And then we focus on the director, we focus on the actor and other things. But unfortunately, when it comes to temples, this is the sponsor kings who are spoken in high terms, like Rajaraja built this temple, Bhojaraja built the grand temple, and we forget the Shilpis or the Vishwakarma Sthapatis who made it happen. To become a Sthapati, you don't need only one BE degree in structural engineering or civil engineering. You need to learn so many things like Talamana measurements, the basics of civil engineering, the body language, ornaments and other things, the basics of zoology, biology, the dance mudras, karanas for doing the sculptures, structural engineering for building and aligning of the temple components, geology to select the rock types, metallurgy for the chiseling tools and other details, and chemistry you need to learn a lot in terms of understanding the colors and preparing the bonding materials. Nowadays, Shilpis need to know little more, the modern day. They need to do AutoCAD, they need to do Lightroom and then Photoshop to visualize what they want and then deliver it to the modern group in the way we want. The latest Ayodhya temple, all the plans and other things are done in AutoCAD, and then we get engineering drawings in visual prints. So this is where the world is going. So we salute the Shilpis who made this happen. Coming back to the agenda, we go to our first step on the evolution of worship. So this section talks about worshipping the supreme force, the one which we could not comprehend, and then which we wanted to worship. So the picture, what we see here, this is one of the old forms of worship, where a pillar surrounded by the fresh palm leaves and the trees and other things is worshipped as a form of God. This is called Kandu. And this they tout it as one of the forms of evolution from the early people to Linga worship and expanding into other idols. Going into this, let us see how the worship of the Supreme Force has progressed over the ages. Earlier Rock Age people were worshipping forces which they couldn't comprehend, like sun, moon, and mountains, rivers, thunder. So they were the major gods, and there are no temples. They looked at the object and then they prayed. And after getting some amount of advancement and going into Stone Age, where they started developing weapons, so the weapons were supreme, and the guy who had the weapons is the king, and one form of worship was the weapon worship. Okay, this was the one of the primary forms, along with the mother worship. Later on, these weapons and other things were kept in natural caves where they were residing, and they worshipped in one part of the safer or inner part of the cave. When people migrated from the caves in the hills to rivers and plains, and then where there are no caves, and then people built the huts and houses. And at the time, the more convenient place is a big tree, and primarily it was put in the open and with a little roof, and then gradually it outgrew the tree itself. Even if the tree has died, the temple survived and expanded into a bigger one. Later on, people with technology advancements, people started building houses in wood, mortar, brick, and other things. The same thing was replicated in temples also. Temples were built with arches and other things. This is the period where some of the agamas also started developing and say that this is how the temples and other things to be structured. So with this, still they had the earlier memory of the caves in which they lived in, and then the current memory of wood, mortar, brick usage. So what they did was, with the advancement of chiseling tools, they cut a natural rock and made cave-like temples in rock, which represented the earlier wood, mortar, brick, and other houses. Later on, they started building monoliths. Monoliths means temples cut out of single rock, like the vertical way in which it is cut. The prime example of this category is the Ellora Kailasanatha temple in Maharashtra. Then the advancements went into cutting stones into blocks and then shaping them into desired one, and then using structural temples out of stones. This is what started around 8th century, 7th century, and this is what is part of an everlasting temple. Most of these temples we see now were done at this point of time as a stone temple. Now, from stone, they went into multi-story temples and then grand temples, and ultimate achievement is the concrete. With concrete, You have the flexibility to mold it in any way you want, any form you want, any dimension, and it has given a totally different kind of flexibility for a temple building. So if you look back, we don't see many of the older temples, and all the temples which wood, brick, mortar were lost to us, primarily because they deteriorate over a period of time, or they have been rebuilt into stone temples. What we get as earlier, some of the earlier temples is like this. This is the 3rd century BC temple found in tsunami of 2006 near Mahabalipuram in Chennai. This is a Murugan temple where the worship, the sanctum worship is a spear or a veil relating to Skanda. So this is the sanctum, and this is the first level, second level kind of structure. So from this point onwards, we are able to see all the evidence of temples and the culmination of temples in the concrete temples. So what we see here is the Murudeshwar temple, which is one of the pinnacles of the current day modern temples, where they have leveraged the flexibility of concrete to the great extent. The Shiva statue here contains a museum and a big infrastructure inside the statue itself. And the grand, one of the largest and tallest gopuras, 22-story here, houses 2 lifts inside, where you will be able to, this entire thing is concrete, and you will be able to conveniently go to the top and have a grand vision on this. So this is how a simple natural worship has come into a concrete worship. Now, let us go into the next phase, how temples expanded. So earlier temples, Devagara temple, Dasadara, were primarily single cell temples in the 3rd century, 4th century kind of structure. And this expanded into a very grand temple by 16th century. What we see is one of the Rajamanar temples in Manarkudi. Can you identify the sanctum or the main place, central place where the deity is? You need to go somewhere here. This is where the deity is. It has grown one layer, 2 layer, 3 layer, 4 layer kind of this with the grand gopurams. So let us see how this development took place and what are the phases and the sequencing. Before we go into this, let us look at the philosophical angle or the logic behind a temple. A temple contains various components. The primary ones are Gopuram, which is the gateway, and we have Dvajastamba, which is the flagstaff, or in some of the northern temples, you have Garuda Stamba instead of the Dvajastamba. The Balipida, this is not for killing animals or so on. This is primarily a logical one where we submit our anger and all the unwanted gunas here and then go forward with a clean mind. And there is a mandapa or this one for Vahana, and you have multiple mandabas, Mahamandabas for prayer and other festivals. And finally we reach the sanctum. This is called Vimana in south, or called Diol, or Latina, or multiple forms as a sanctum in North India. So this is where the primary god resides in a sacred place. So this is equated to a human lying down with the feet mapped to the Gopura and the body, hip mapped to Balipita, and the chest to the Mandapa, and your head and the brain mapped to the Vimana. This is one way of visualizing the representation. The other way is to map it to the chakras and linga concept. Now we are familiar with the components, and the gateway or the Gopura is mapped to a Bhutalinga, and the Dvajastamba is mapped to a Dvajalinga. And the Balipida is synonymous with the Bhadralingam. And when you come to this, the sanctum of a Shiva temple is mapped to a Mula Linga. This is the primary deity, and the superstructure above it, the tower or superstructure or a Vimana part, is visualized as a Akanta Linga, the grand open space. So this is a visualization of various linga forms for the temple. Now, if you compare this, you can map it to the Agna chakras which are available in human body. So Mooladhara is here, and Swadhisthana is here, and Anahata, Visuddha, all these are mapped to. So this is in the neck part. It equivalents to the neck of the temple called Ardha Mandapa, and primarily Anya chakra is mapped to the Mula Linga. So this is how the 6 major chakras of the body are mapped to the components of temples. Interestingly, here there is no chakra for Gopura, which is an odd thing, but this is how people have visualized it. So let us compare this to an existing temple and how it looks. I am taking Tanjavur big temple in Tamil Nadu as a sample. This is one of the largest temples in India, and let us see how it maps. So the same way your foot is somewhere mapped to the Gopura, and your knee and other things is mapped to another Gopura. Your hip portion is mapped to the Balipeda, the Jastamba, and Mahamandapa is mapped to the chest part. And the main Vimana and the sanctum is mapped to your head and the Anga chakra there. So this is how people have visualized and structured a temple and built temples accordingly. So now we are familiar with the components of the temple from Gopura up to the Vimana. So the place where the god resides is called Vimana, and the entrance way to the temple is called Gopura. So in this, like earlier, what we saw as a small temple, it has expanded to a grand temple complex. And what we see here in photo is the largest functioning Hindu temple in the world. This is Srirangam in Trichy, near Chennai. This is on the banks of Kaveri River, and it is in an island. A bigger complex is Angkor Wat, Cambodia, but it is not under active worship. This has got references from Sangam age. This is 300 BC up to the 19th century. It is one of the old temples, but grand temple. Can you identify the sanctum or the Garbhagriha here? Let us go in, like from this Gopram, if you cross 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, somewhere over here you see a yellow bright spot. There is a golden gilded Gopram, which is the center, and there is a sanctum. So you can imagine the size of the city with the 4 major towers. One tower here, this is south, and this is north, and this is east, and this is west. So this is the area of the temple with the 7 prakaras inside, and around 50 plus small shrines inside that. Even town buses and local buses fly inside this temple complex in some places. So this is how it has grown into a grand temple city by itself. So let us see how a small sanctum, a single cell sanctum, expanded into a major city over the period from 600 to 1800 CE. So initially the content was only a small sanctum where the main deity resided, and this was either roof or having a superstructure on top of it. So over a period, slowly Panchayatana kind of a concept happened, and the remaining other deities, Ganapati, Vishnu, and Durga, all are put in kostas. This is niches around the main temple for worship. This is the second stage of development. And after that, like we saw the Dwajastamba, Balipida, and the Vahana Mandapa also started appearing as an extension to this. Later on, for more convenience and for grander thing, people extended into one more mandapa where the devotees can come and stand and do prayers with convenience. This is called Ardha Mandapa, which is extension of the temple. And as time progresses, this is almost everything is around 200 years of time span. At a later period, Mahamandabas also started appearing. This is primarily for doing functions, prayers, and then all the festivals and other things. The deity used to get shifted from here, and then all the Kalyana Utchava and all this used to happen here. Then Parivara temple started appearing. The primary one, Madapalli, is meant in the southeast corner, and Ganapati and Murugan temple started appearing, and Amman Sannidhi, this is the Shakti temple, started appearing on the side facing south at a later period of time, somewhere around 900,000 CE. And Navagrahas started appearing. Earlier they were in the lintel, and they came as a separate temple itself. Later on, this entire complex is covered by a prakara with more and more small shrines around it, and with the grand wall and with the gopuram entrance. And this entire complex was roofed to cover it from the sun and rain. At a later period, somewhere around 1500, 1600, Natya Mandavas and other Mandavas started appearing around the temple. The final thing during the 1600, 1700, just to avoid Muslim invasion and other outside forces, the temple started, particularly in South India, they started building grand walls around the temples with the entrance towers on all the four sides. These are called gopuras, and they had a lot of fortification. In many of the later wars, these were used as a fortifications, and wars have happened around this. So this is how a small sanctum expanded into a grand temple complex. So what we see here is only two prakara temple. In Srirangam, Trichy, we have 7 prakaras with concentric rectangles, one after other. So this covers, so far we have seen how the temple expansion happened over a period. Now, let us see the next component, Vimana. Vimana is a central place where the deity resides, and this is where the single cell expanded into a very complex form. So this, what we see in this picture is from Sanchya Stupi, where we see the houses and temples. This is the forms of temples which were seen in the earlier times. This is from the Sanchya Stupi, which is before BC. Before we go into temple forms, let us see the philosophy around the shapes. In Hindu temples, more emphasis is done on philosophical meaning and other things for almost everything. And this is also true for the shapes we use here. The shapes we use in temple plans, temple components, shikaras, and the griva, the neck part of the temple. So the first part is Nagara shape. This is a shape mentioned by Agamas, and this group of components contains square as well as rectangle. So these shapes convey Brahma, and then this is synonymous with Brahma, and we have 3 types of gunas, sattva and other thing. This is a static and stable character is conveyed by this kind of shapes. So for Sattvic gods and things, normally we use rectangular shapes or rectangular shikaras. The next style of shapes is the Dravida shapes, hexagon and octagon. This is synonymous with Vishnu, and Rajasya or dynamic or aggressive character. And this is with either with 6 or 8 faced polygons. The third category is the Vesara shape. Vesara means, in geographical terms, they mean the central India. This is circle and ellipse and apsidal. So various forms of circle and combination. This is denoted by the Shiva aspect, and Tamasa, which is a balanced position, and this shape is a balance between the square and polygon. So wherever you go in the temple plans or in the temple walls or the shikaras or in many of the many shrines, these are the primary shapes which are repeatedly getting used. So if you see the early temple forms, the early single cell forms were primarily from the memory of the man who had dwelt in various forms like conical and semicircular or straight. These forms were there in the mind, and the early temples were also in the same style. We have square base with a layered top, and then square base with a oblong or amalaka top, and square base with a polygon, and apsidal. Apsidal means a rectangle plus half square, half circle. So apsidal top and apsidal plan, like rectangle plan and wagon top kind of. And so these are the basic simple cells which were there during 4th century or 5th century. Later on, these shapes are already, if you want to see all the shapes in one place, you can visit Mahabalipuram. This is around 50 miles from Chennai, where a lot of experimentation in sculpturing temple and taken, and you can get almost all examples of a temple. I have done a 4-part series on Malay temples alone, which is available on my YouTube. In this, if you see the square plan, we have what I'm going to show as examples. All of them are monolithic rathas, which were sculptured in single stone from top down. This Valayankutti Ratham is got a square plan and a unlayered design. And the Draupadi Ratha, this has got a square plan and like a shaped 4-corner, like a hut. The next one, instead of the square plan, it has got a circular plan and a circular top. This is there in Shore Temple. And the next one, this is the apsidal form, like a rectangle plus half circle. You can see the rectangle plus half circle as a base, as also as a top, as a shikara. The next interesting form is the standard South Indian form, which is a square plan and a pyramid kind of structure and a polygon top on the shikara. This is the standard model for most of the South Indian temples. And the other variation, which is normally seen in Gopuras, is this form, rectangular base and a sala or a wagon top kind of a shikara. So when you go to South Indian temples, these are the major forms you are going to get exposed to. Now, the small temples or the single cell temple or slightly bigger temples, what we saw in 5th century, 6th century, they wanted to make it bigger. So when they wanted to make it bigger, the challenge for them is that you can build it higher and higher, and it will look ugly without any embellishments and other things. And if you build it very tall without expanding the base, it will become a problem. So the challenge for this is that different parts of India, various areas, they tried expanding into different ways, and this led to three distinct styles of temple architecture. These distinct styles over three different zones of India were at a later period expanded into their own streams. The first one we are going to see is a southern style. Basically, they focus on a square base and with a pyramidal roof with multiple tiers like haras on it. And these layers contained mini temples of square, rectangle, and apsidal forms. So this is the basic style of southern one, where they expanded by building more and more layers. How they did the layering part is done in the next diagram. So instead of just building it, so they added different mini temples of varying heights. This is a square mini temple, and this is a rectangular sala type mini temple, and what we see here is an apsidal form of a mini temple. So they physically they put joins of this so that the aggregation is broader and you have a larger base, and it looks as though it was constructed layer by layer, each layer containing one row of a collection of mini temples. So this is how the southern style expanded their complex temples. If you look at the other side in the northern, they developed their temples in a different way. If you see the northern temples, these are cruciform base, like a plus and edges on plus, and with a convex roof and with the vertical columns, unlike the horizontal rows here. And this is aggregated by adding more and more mini temples. This is half temples added to it at a varying height. So this is how the aggregation happened. You had the earlier large temple, central one, and to this you added half of these shikaras called Anka shikaras added to the all four sides of varying sizes. So it is gradually reduced in such a way that you have a broader base and you can also increase the height accordingly. This is how the aggregation happened, and this is called the Shekari kind of an temple. In the central part of India, they took advantage of both these styles, and they started building circular, apsidal, and star kind of bases. So the roofs were a mix of this style and Nagara style, and there were multiple sanctums, and there were also they stacked the smaller temples like this around this. Instead of just having the pillar alone, they stacked similar same style temples all around the layers, and then they developed their own style called Bhumija. So this is how the smaller single cell temples expanded into a complex temples at a later point of time. If you see how these temples evolved in North India, it started with a single cell room with no superstructure, only flat roof, around 5th to 6th centuries. This is the Bhumara temple. And later on, in another 2 centuries, they started developing, instead of if you see this square shape, this edges are projected to come up with a cruciform design. The other variation is in the infrastructure built on top of the roof. This is the superstructure, and we have a pyramidal superstructure in layers. This is called Famsana, and with a shikara on top of it. This is around 7th or 8th centuries. Later on, this got extended like Reka Shikara or Latina Shikara, like Latina is a creeper. So this tall curvilinear shikara started appearing around 9th or 10th centuries. So this contains no additional features, but they were able to build taller temples. Around 10th and 12th century, we reached the pinnacle. The last three examples are from Khajuraho, where this temple, they added a lot of smaller temples around it in varying heights and other things. And the mandabas also were added. The mandabas also got shikaras like this. So you have one temple, one sanctum, and three mandabas. So these three mandabas are having varying height shikaras, and the look is like a slope and a Mahamir kind of an effect. So ultimately, this kind of a style becomes a front porch there. So in effect, they have integrated all the evolution and then come up with a complex Mahamiri type of temples, and this is the Khajuraho, the pinnacle of North Indian architecture. So far, we have seen how the smaller temples or single cell temples were aggregated and added and built into complex forms. So, so in this, the way the aggregation differed in different styles, and then it has come up with a lot of regional styles. So let us see some good examples of the regional styles. South India, the famous Brigadiswara temple, which is a pyramid-like temple with a layer of smaller temples. In the North India, we have the Latina or the vertical Reka with a shikara on top. Later on, these two got merged in central Karnataka area. They came up with this kind of a Latina kind of a style, but with smaller mini shrines in the layers. So this is a Vesara kind of a structure. Later on, the aggregation started happening around the Latina. I think we have developed a lot of Angashikaras, and the bigger and taller temples started developing in Shekari style. The other way of aggregation, like I said earlier, was to add small temple replicas around this and then build a different. This is a Bhumija style. It is predominantly available in Karnataka and central region place. Then a diamond kind of a shape started evolving from the Famsana, and this is normally used for all the mandabas in South India or North India. The Odisha region had their own styles of variation. So this style, they call it in a different way as Reka Sikara. And the wagon roof kind of an style, they call it as a Valabi or Kakra. And the layer or a statics from something similar to the South Indian style, but no ornamentation, just a flat layering. It is called as Famsana in North India or Pida Dule in Odisha. So these are the regional styles that are developed over a period, and these are the styles which are available on the later 12th or 13th century kind of time frame. So now, having seen this, let us go to the next section, Vimana components. So when we see, so far we have seen major various styles and components. Now what we are going to look at is the architectural components of the various temples. Before we go into this, we have seen that the temple can be visualized as a human body, and the same way the house is also visualized as a human body. If you see this, we can break the human body into four major parts: the leg, body, chest, neck, head, and shikara or the head. Same way, A house also can be broken into several parts and visualized as a component of a body, and we can visualize the temple or the Vimana also in the same way. Let us see how these three work together. If you see the first part, this is called Adhisthana, which is the base, and this is the legs. So in the house also we have the base, and here also we have the base. And in the second one we have the body, which is the called wall or biti in the temple, and a normal wall in a house. And the third one is the chest part, which is typically represented by the roof or the slope here, and the prastara or the roof portion in a temple. The fourth component is the neck or the smaller part here, and normally we have this kind of a neck kind of a structure in a house, and the pinnacle is the top portion of the house, and which is equivalent to the shikara or the head of the temple. On top of it, we have the stupi, which is the finial on top. And what is the stupi for a house? Normally, this is the dish antenna or whatever TV antenna we have on top. So this is how we are able to map and visualize a house or a temple as a human body. So having seen a South Indian example, let us also see a North Indian example and and a Central India example, and see how these components are same. If what you have in left is a typical North Indian style temple, and even Kalinga architecture also follows the same style. What we have on this one is a famsana or a lattice layer form, which is one of the early developed central and northern styles. So both have the upapida or the foundation, and they have the pita or the basement, the granite base on which the entire temple stands, and the wall portion. This is the wall portion here, and the kapoda or the cornice. Normally in northern temples, not much of kapota is there, but in some also southern temples, this overhang is there. This is primarily to prevent the rainwater and other dripping to fall directly on wall, and then to fall a little away from that. Usually in southern temples, this is extended to a great extent so that it also provides some amount of shade to the people who walk around this place. This is all ornamental sukana. This is called sukanasis, which are ornamental design from the old wooden structure days. So this is split up into layers. There are horizontal layers, and there is a vertical division like this. This is the central vertical division, and the side corner the vertical division is there. And this is the ganta or gala or throat, the neck part. And there is an amalika or dome on top of it, tipped by a kalasa or stuti. So if you take any temple, these are all the basic parts, and then if you remember the human form, almost you can remember most of the forms in a temple. So this gives an overview of the Vimana components, and this gives a rough idea of what the temple is and how many components are there in a basic temple. Now let us go to some of the grand temples of India, in the present, and in the future. So this will give an idea of the variety and the complexity of the temples we have in India. And later on, we can, in following sessions, we can go very deeper into these temples. I have given detailed presentations on almost all of the temples mentioned here, and you can see the detailed presentations in my YouTube channel. Let us talk about the pinnacle of North Indian style of architecture. This is in Khajuraho in Madhya Pradesh. So here in a small area, we have a grand collection of temples which were built over a period of 250 years, varying styles, varying structures, different idols, and different deities and different styles. So this is the Vishwanatha temple, Parvati temple, and the Pratapeshwara temple. This has got three different styles built into one temple. We have Varaha temple, very old. Lakshmi temple is there. Nageswara temple, which is the Shivalinga temple, and Lakshmana, Viswanatha, and Jagadamba. And we have this. This is the Khajuraho temple, which is the main temple, Kandariya Mahadeva temple. This is the pinnacle of North Indian structure. So this is, if you want to see the pinnacle, that is where we go. When we go into the west side, Dwarka is the one of the major architectural temples. This is in Dwarka, first capital of Gujarat, and this is one of the four Chardham temples, the other three being Rameswaram, Puri, and Badrinath. This is a fantastic. This has been constructed, destroyed over so many times, and then it is said to be there from Krishna times, and built by Krishna's son, and destroyed several times. So the latest version was built around 16th century, and after that further additions are there. This has got 5 stories, and this is the Mahamandapa with the 5 stories, a grand Shikara and side Mandapa. And the main temple rises to a height of 256 feet. The deity is Trivikrama form of Vishnu with the 4 arms. Another interesting part of this is the 50 feet long flag which is unfurled, which is having Chandra and Surya on the flag. This flag is hosted and changed 4 times in a day, where the persons physically climb there and then take the flag, and then they give it for auction and change it to a new flag. This is one of the famous ceremonies. A similar thing happens in Puri also. Puri, they do it in the morning and evening. Then we come to the central India, where the capital of Chalukyas, Badami, in that Pattadakal was around 20 miles from Badami, on the river side of Malaprabha. There they experimented a lot of temple varieties. They saw the northern forms from the northern victories, and then they also saw Kailasanatha and other temples from their foray into South India. So they built a fusion of the design of temples. If you see, the Sangameswara is a traditional South Indian style, and this is Kadisadiswara is North Indian, and Kalanganada is typical North Indian style. And then these two, Virupaksha and Mallikarjuna, are twin temples built by 2 queens of Vikramaditya, primarily in the South Indian style, inspired by the Kailasnatha temple of Kanchipuram. So this is another cradle of temple building in the central style of architecture. Now, if you go to Odisha, it is also famous for grand temples, and this is Lingaraja temple in Bhubaneswar, and the central deity is a Tribhuvana Ishvara. Tribhuvana Ishvara is meaning the Lord of 3 worlds. So this Tribhuvana Ishvara is the name for the changed form is called Bhubaneswar, the name of the city. So this is a massive complex, and photography not allowed inside. So we are taking photographs from outside in an observation platform. This is taken during a sunset in the evening. This is central deity, the sanctum, and the second first prayer mandapa, second Bhoga mandapa, Natya mandapa. Like that, 4 sequence of mandapas are there. And the same form repeats for the Parvati temple also. The central sanctum, the first Darshan mandapa, Bhoga mandapa, and Natya mandapa. So, like that, we have two equally bigger and grander temples in Orissa. One is the Puri temple, the other one is the Konark Sun temple. Coming to south, we have the grandest and some of the biggest temples available in India, and the examples are built by Cholas near Tanjavur. 4 grand temples built by Chola dynasties in a space of 250 years. So first one is given structured by Rajaraja, the Tanjavur big temple, and the second one is Ganga Ganda Cholapuram, built by his son Rajendra, and the third one near Kumbakonam, which is built by, it's called Rajarajeshwaram, or popularly called Dharaswaram nowadays, which was built by 4 or 5 generations down the line by Rajaraja II. The fourth temple of the similar design is built by Kulothanga III, another 3 generations down the line, around 20 miles from Kumbakonam, called Tribhuvanam. Tribhuvanam means Tribhuvaneshwara, like owner of 3 worlds. So these 4 temples are grand with a lot of fine activities and structure, and they excel in terms of the variety of small mini temples and sculptures. They are the ultimate, and this is one of the tallest temples with 236 feet, and this is 180 plus, this is 150 kind of thing. And these are UNESCO World Heritage Sites as 4 great living Chola temples. So these are all, what we saw is the 4 great examples of temples that were built under 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. If you see the latest ones, recently built in 20th century, we go to Murudeeshwar. This is the grand example of a concrete temple. On a small jutting island on this, they have built a grand, this is the old traditional Murudeshwar temple, which is part of the Ravana a Purana story where the linga he carried, it was broken into pieces and one part fall here. But they have expanded into a beautiful complex, and they have built a new Shiva temple. And this is the second tallest Shiva idol. This is concrete, hollow inside. We have a grand museum and other infrastructure inside the idol. The Raja Gobra here is 238 feet tall with 20 floors, and you have 2 lifts operating inside it, where you can go by lift comfortably to the top and have a grand view on this. So this is an example of how concrete can do wonders, and we can do a lot of structures with ease. This entire structure is concrete. And it has got fun parts, beach resorts, and then hotels and everything. This is the complete self-contained tourist spot. So this is what we have. Let us go to the future. The next feature is a major milestone happened in August, where the foundation for the Ayodhya temple was done, and this is the structural diagram which has been released by the Sthapati team, designed by Sompura, who designed Somnath and Akshardham temple. So this has got this is a Nagara Latna type of a temple, 280 feet wide and then 300 feet length and 161 feet tall gopura. Unlike Dwaraka, it has got only 3 floors, and this is once it is done, this is touted to be the 3rd largest complex below Angkor Wat and Srirangam Trichy Temple, which we saw earlier. So for this, the construction work has started, and we have after the Bhumi Puja ceremony, the holy soil was brought from 4 Chardham locations, and the construction work is started. L&T has taken the contract, and some of the work is being done there. This is designed to be done on a modular and component base without any joint or bonding materials used. So this is future, near future. We will be able to see it in another 2-3 years. But far future and the ultimate is the real future. ISKCON is building a Chandrodaya Mandir in Vrindavan in Mathura. This is how it looks like, grand, and then reaching the sky. And this is the architectural diagram, and this is work in progress. And see the way a typical North Indian temple, a grand tower, and then added minute Ankasikaras of revering heights around it, and so that you have a grand base and you are able to build a taller temple on this. So the weight, and then this one is split over a period here. So this is built by ISKCON, 300 crores project, 62 acres. And this is a very modern temple with a helipad, planetarium, night safari, and the project was started in 2004. So planned to be 700 feet and multiple lifts and view towers. So this is like this will beat the Eiffel Tower and other things very, very, very comfortably. So this is what is the future of temples. So with this, we stop and we complete the coverage of Vimana part. In later sessions, we'll be covering the evolution of idols and how we will be able to identify them, and also what is the information we get in terms of Puranas and history from inscriptions and sculptures. So before we end this, I'd like to end on a philosophical note, saying that we learned so many things about temple, components, parts, and other things. Why do we learn this? Our purpose is not to create sculpture. We are not going into sculpture. It requires, like I said in the earlier beginning, it requires a lot of experience, and there is a dedicated stream for that. We can't do that. But what we will be able to do is that by attending this kind of courses and actually going and see temples in a different light, we understand the complexities of the sculptures, architects, and paintings. We understand them, we appreciate, and we enjoy, and we say our pranams and thanks to the creators who did it. If you look at this, your temples or vimanas have got so many metaphysical concepts and construction techniques and designs, which makes them in a totally different way. And this has got sculptures. They give the stories, Puranas, and the way the life of kings and the social times there. The inscriptions document how the society functioned at that time, what is the political structure, economy, and what are the law and structures. The mandavas promoted a lot of fine arts and education, and the prakaras, the perimeter rooms, were used for many purposes: teaching, medical grounds, granary, treasury, local meetings, and others. I think most of the US-based modern temples do almost all of them in a grand way. So the objective of this kind of a presentation is to understand our heritage, appreciate the art, and then actively support in protecting our existing temples and ensure that we pass on the details of heritage to our next generation. Thank you very much. Thanks for patiently listening to this. My thanks to the temple authorities for hosting this. And if you have any doubts on this presentation or on any session, feel free to contact me in this locations. Um, this and many such detailed presentations are available in my YouTube channel, Babu for Heritage, and you can click on that to get the latest updates, or you can contact me over email. Once again, thank you. Thanks for the HSBT authorities for giving me an opportunity to talk about the temples and spread the heritage awareness, and thanking Siva Ramakrishnan, who is my friend and who actively coordinated and then arranged for making this presentation happen. And thank the viewers who actually attended the Zoom session and who are watching this. Thank you. Have a nice day. Stay at home and then stay safe, and then have a nice weekend. Bye. So goodbye till we meet again in the next session of Know Your Culture Through Temples program. Thank you.